Hello, my name is Barbara Field, and welcome to my channel, The Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them. And this channel was created to make a place for people who are grieving various kinds of losses to feel like other people get them and that it's okay for them to grieve just the way they are. And today I've asked Maude Shellhause, a hypnotherapist, to come and talk to us about her work in working with people who are grieving losses, even if they don't realize that they are. And so, Maude, how about introducing us to you and your work?
Thank you so much, Barbara. I have been working with people for grief for 30 years now, which seems so funny to say because it just happened, my work anniversary, a few days ago. But I think that oftentimes people don't think of hypnotherapy first for helping with grief, but we are mostly subconscious beings. The subconscious mind makes up 95% or so of our minds, and grief lives in the subconscious and obviously sometimes in the conscious as well. Things get stored and buried in the subconscious that can cause us to not be able to process grief easily or well. And we have all kinds of beliefs and values, as you have been sharing so eloquently with your viewers about grief that also are within the subconscious mind. So um, there are just a multitude of reasons that people come to me that are grieving, and we're able to help them process the grief in a more healthy way.
That's great. So, how did you did you do special training or personal experiences? How did you come to a place where you feel really fluid in understanding people who are grieving and working with grief?
Great question. And I did do some training for grief initially, but I had no idea what was in store at that time because what happened fairly early on in my career is that I was asked by several clients within a short period of time to work with them for grief and also with clients who were going through the dying process. And that ended up expanding into working with their families after they did die through their grief. And so I took an initial course specific to helping people with grief and with hypnotherapy. And then I took the real life crash course almost as soon as that happened. But looking back, I was felt a little bit less prepared than I would have liked to have been at that time. But I'll always be thankful that it did happen that way because it really opened me up to have much more um, capacity and skill to help people with grief.
I totally agree. I always say, I always believed I was a good grief therapist. And then my husband died. And now I know I'm a great grief therapist because you can't walk through the catacombs with people if you've never been there.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just don't know until you are there, right? You just don't have any way to know until then.
Yeah. So talk to us. What would be typical if someone came to have a session with you? What would happen?
So, quite often, typical is that I'll begin working with someone for a reason that seems to be unrelated to grief. And then it comes to light that there's a lot of grief there that's causing whatever the symptom was that someone came to see me for. So that could be anything from developing unhealthy habits with alcohol or smoking or eating, overeating. There's a long list of those, of course, or depression. Oftentimes people don't equate that with grief right away. And then a little bit less typical, um, but also quite often, I work with people because they feel that they are not handling grief well, or that they've been grieving too long, or that their grief is taking over their entire lives. So I would say that those different scenarios are probably the majority of how people come to me for hypnotherapy.
And so what happens when I get there? It's my first session with you.
The
What?
first the first session is always, and it's very gentle after this, but the first session is the most gentle session you could possibly imagine. And so they sit down in the hypnotherapy chair, I play some soft music, and we bring them into a nice place of balance. When we're in heavy grief, we feel way out of balance, and it shows up in all different kinds of areas of life. And I don't think that it's often that we think, oh, I need to get into a place of balance. But when we can come back into balance, it puts things into perspective. We're more easily able to move through grief. So that very first session is just a very, very soft balancing hypnotherapy session. So I'm giving a series of hypnotic instructions that brings someone into a more peaceful state, a more calm state, and that comes with them when they leave. So that's usually our very best place to start, so that they have a really positive foundation to move forward from.
So, people want to get over their grief, and we mostly know that's not going to happen. So, if I came to you, like if I've watched a hypnotherapy show at the fair, right? I think that you're going to be able to magically change my brain, and the sadness and the agony are going to be all gone. So, what are your long-term goals for someone? What will it look like when it works?
Such a great question, because it irks me to no end when I see those little snippets on TV, or, some sort of a show where basically they usually show the hypnotherapist waving a watch or snapping their fingers, and all of a sudden the person feels completely like a new person. And what actually happens with hypnotherapy is that the charge around the experiences that cause so much pain and sadness with grief and all of those other emotions that are connected becomes less. So it takes the edge off of the charge. There's still memory, of course, of the experiences, but it can take overwhelming grief to a manageable level. And there's more space for objectivity. People don't feel so trapped in grief if we can create that space and that calm. And I also work with people to be able to have more space and capacity to be able to remember all of the wonderful parts about their loved one's life, or if it's not grief about losing a person, the pet, or a marriage before a divorce, or a job that was lost. There's just so many ways that we grieve, as you well know, Barbara.
Yeah, so it feels like in the beginning, the grief, it just feels like you're on fire. Everything is on fire. And 9 years into it, I still have waves of sadness, but it doesn't feel like it burns. It's still not good at any level. But like you said, there's far more fond memories. And when I have a fond memory, if it wants to tickle the sadness, it's more like instead of a raging fire in the inside of my body. And I've heard it said that trauma therapy takes a sort of a multicolor bow stereo image and transforms it into a black and white picture of someplace we went on vacation 2 years ago. So you can still see it and you still know it's sad or bad or all of those, but it doesn't just blaze in your body like that. So help us understand the mechanism of hypnotherapy that puts out the fire of the memories.
I really love how you put that and how relatable that must be to everyone watching this that has experienced grief and worked through a lot of that grief. Hypnotherapy hypnosis is known as the straight pathway to the subconscious mind, which is where all of our thought patterns are. It's where all of our blocks are, anything that keeps pulling us back into that fire, for example, where our limitations are. Everything we've ever experienced is within the subconscious mind. So when someone is in hypnosis, we have the direct access to that huge part of our minds, the subconscious mind. So when I'm working with someone, it's almost like metaphorically sliding aside the conscious part of the mind. And I'm able to give people, or any hypnotherapist as well, is able to give hypnotic instructions that are very specific. And while the subconscious is wide open, the client is very suggestible and things happen much more quickly when we are not unconsciously blocking, right? When we're in the normal waking state, oftentimes we don't mean to. We can want help with something. We can really want to heal from things, but we will block. And I think we've all caught ourselves doing that at one time or another. But when we're in hypnosis, it's such a relaxed, open state that things can change in a positive way, in a very gentle, but really efficient way also.
Mm-hmm. I tell people that it's called the comprehensive resource model. It's very akin to hypnotherapy. The goal is to just try to help people gently go down there into their right hemisphere. And I tell people it's a little bit like oxytocin at the dentist. So if you've ever had oxytocin, you're kind of like, whoa, that's a terrible smell. Oh, he just pulled my tooth. Wow, this is going to hurt tomorrow. But you don't really care. And so when you can slow your nervous system down, create that safety in your body, then it can sort of gently start to release trauma instead of it feeling like 10,000 ladybugs escaping me at the same time. And so that sense of, oh yeah, no wonder that's so terrible. No wonder I'm so stuck. Just letting all of the on fire parts just kind of extinguish themselves. And what you're left with is the best grown-up version of you that says, well, this is going to suck.
Right. I absolutely love your metaphors. That was perfect.
Thank you. And so like, how do you build trust? Getting people to let you, hey, let's just go into your subconscious where you're highly suggestible and let me just wander around in there unattended.
Well, let me begin by saying that I don't recommend having just anyone hypnotize anybody. And in fact, it's a little arrogant of me, not arrogant. I don't know what the right word is. I
Um,
don't volunteer for stage hypnosis personally because it is a very, very open state. So I guess what I mean to say is I get a little bit like I'm on a high horse about that because it is a very, very open state of mind. And it is really important to find a hypnotherapist that is reputable, that knows what they're doing. It's your precious mind, after all, right? Um, and that being said, hypnosis is also much different than most people think it is. And that's because, again, of those mostly the TV shows, the stage stuff, everything that you see about hypnosis, typically, because hypnosis and even hypnotherapy are often portrayed to be states of unconsciousness. So most people think that they will get sleepier and sleepier in the beginning, and then they might have like a passing out or fainting sensation, and then they might wake up later thinking something like, where am I? What happened? That kind of thing. But it is actually nothing like that. Someone in hypnosis is aware. They can hear everything that I'm saying. They can hear the music in the background that is playing in a session. There's no loss of control. So I think that's really important and was a huge relief to me when I first learned that, because someone in hypnosis can actually open their eyes at any time. They're very comfortable and they're very relaxed, so they don't always feel like that. But there is definitely a sense of awareness and control, even in that very relaxed state.
cool. And then I've heard it said we won't, even under a hypnosis or a meditative state, we will not violate our principles. We will not do anything that we believe strongly against. And so say a little bit about that.
I think that's really important. Our core beliefs and values are intact no matter what we go through in life. And I think it's very unfortunate when hypnosis is portrayed as like the state of someone being catatonic and having no control over themselves, because it's really not true. I think that's akin to like if you watch a cop show and you're with a police officer, they're saying like, none of that's real. That's all ridiculous, or so many other professions that are portrayed. But again, because our core beliefs are always with us, those are at the deepest parts of our being. And we go into the state of hypnosis many times a day. The most obvious times are as we're about to fall asleep at night, especially if you're not the type that falls asleep as soon as your head hits the pillow and your thoughts start to slow down and you start to drift. There's a period of time where if, say, the phone were to make a little noise or the dog down the street barked, you wouldn't really care, even though you could hear it. Also, if you ever have the luxury to wake up without an alarm and you're kind of drifting awake, that's a state of hypnosis in between. Even daydreaming or being on autopilot, driving past your exit and not noticing, is a state of hypnosis. So I'm bringing that up because, of course, our core beliefs and values are intact at those times. So being in a formalized hypnotherapy session is no different. You still have that awareness. You're still you. You still are intact with all of your core beliefs.
Cool. And so, what do you think, in your experience of working with people like who are want very much to do this and get this fire put out inside of them? What do you think are the things that block people or inhibit people from being able to just drop in there and do the work?
Mm. I think that sometimes people think that they should be doing it in a certain way. Sometimes people think they should have done it on their own already, especially with grief, where we're so often told that there's a time limit with grief. So I think that that can block people. Also, if somebody doesn't have an understanding of what hypnosis really is and what it really feels like, then that can be a block too. So I always start by having a complimentary consultation with anybody that I'm about to work with because I want them to have a full understanding so that they can be open, especially when they really need assistance with grief. I hate for that false information that's been provided to them to keep them from being as open as they want to be.
Yeah. So sometimes in my work, I will, do all that, some education, some light duty experience. And so I will be doing a session that's just designed to just create some quiet and safety and some awareness, and not really designed to take somebody really deep. But it turns out that their nervous system is really good at processing trauma. And so they drop immediately and quickly into a very deep work, which is fine because I know what to do about that. But so what happens in your world when someone comes in to say, oh, I just like to stop biting my fingernails, and then the first session they're processing some horrible childhood trauma?
Mm. So, of course, this can happen, and it makes me really thankful when it does that I do use such a gentle modality because when I'm working with someone and then they're in that state, it's so relaxing and so comfortable that sometimes people even say it's the most relaxed they've ever been. So mostly I'm just thankful that they're working through it while they are so deeply relaxed and comfortable, because working through something traumatic is no joke ever. And I, one of the reasons that I went into hypnotherapy in the first place as my choice of career is because I didn't want to force people to relive trauma because it can be re-traumatizing. So when I'm working with people, this particular modality of hypnotherapy that I was trained in and use addresses someone's own inner wisdom, that part of them, that wisest part of them. We have all these different parts to us. We're complex human beings, but there's a part of us, the wisest part of us within us, that knows exactly what we need and how we need to process something, which is different than anybody else. So when I'm doing that, both myself and the client have added assurance that they can move through whatever comes up in a really gentle manner.
Cool. So how do you play catch up? You've got them in this very gentle state, and suddenly they are experiencing a really terrible thing and they've gotten way activated. So, how do you chill that back down?
I have a really long list of very soothing hypnotic instructions just for situations like that. So if that happens, I have lots of different things that I can say to just move everything back into a place of peace. I also can always bring someone out of the hypnotic state if it feels like too much. We can do a check-in. Typically, people want to go back into that state. If they don't, that's okay. I have the training to work with them and talk with them about the experience, and we can move into it again in a later date or whatever we need to do from there. And also remember, someone in hypnosis can open their eyes, they can come out of hypnosis on their own. So even if I wasn't giving them those soothing instructions or bringing them out, they still have that ultimate control, which is such a good thing.
That is a good thing. And so how long do people typically stay with you? Like in the old psychotherapy days, you would see Sigmund Freud 3 times a week for years. How long do they hang around with you?
That was a great example. And sometimes people go, how many years will this take? When they come in. But I usually see people anywhere from about 3 or 4 sessions up to about, let's say, 18 to 20. So I'm working with people typically, if they have that feeling of being on fire that you described, twice a week for a pretty short period of time. So the sessions are close together, but they're not extended out into many months or years. Once we get moving through it, it's pretty quick because it's so gentle.
That's cool. Okay, so at the end of my videos, I always ask you for your 1 minute wisdom. So if there's just 1 minute of stuff that you could hope people would carry away from hanging out with us, what do you want people to know?
Oh, I love that. And I would say that even though we haven't talked about this piece, one thing that comes out of hypnotherapy programs for grief is that people become more compassionate towards themselves as a result. So if you're watching and that's been a struggle for you, I really want to just convey that often is the end, as a place to jump off to a new beginning. So if you can, just really give yourself some love.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you so much for giving us your time and wisdom. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you, Barbara.